All right, we got everyone on the meeting. Looks like we're good. All right, guys, we're going to get into the research portion of the meeting. Today we got a special presentation from Bugcrowd going over some web app penetration testing, and Link Kark will introduce everything. You take it away.
Great. Thanks for having us. Very excited about today's presentation. It's our first time at RIT. Also excited about that too. I'll just do a quick intro for Kieran. He's staying at work a little late because he's over in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is super exciting. And as he tells it, he's the only full-time Irish ethical hacker, I believe. You can confirm that when you jump on, but I won't talk too long. I want him to get into the meat of all this, but I just wanted to say if you have any questions about Bug Bounty or Bugcrowd or anything like that, reach out to me. Will has my email, link.clark@bugcrowd.com. When you find your first vulnerability, even if it's a dupe, let me know. I'll make sure to get some swag sent your way. We got plenty of stuff, and we're excited to support new hackers as they grow their skills. So I'm going to pass it over to Kieran, let him get started, and let's learn some stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, Link. Can you hear me okay? Oh, actually, wait.
Yep, you're
This
good.
mic needs to be closer, I think. Cool. I'll start by sharing my slides. Hope this works okay. Really sorry about that. I didn't have my screen share settings enabled, so start now.
It looks good on our end.
Cool. Can you see my slides now?
Yep.
Perfect. So first of all, huge thanks to Link for organizing all of this, and thanks to Bugcrowd. And let's get right into it. This is going to be effectively a primer on how to get into bug bounty. And I understand that a lot of you probably already have a pretty established background of just the theoretical side of web hacking, probably XSS, SQL injections, and I'll hopefully bridge the gap between having those skills and applying them to real world hardened attack surface. So a bit about me. I'm Ciaran, I'm Irish, I'm 23 years old, and at the moment I live in Edinburgh. I've been doing web security for about 4.5 years now. I started in bug bounty and I've done some CTF as well. And I also spent 2 years working at a startup called App Omni as a SaaS security researcher. And I specialize in client-side hacking, which is JavaScript stuff, API hacking, and SaaS security by extension of the work I used to do. So to illustrate the difference between what you learn in the classroom and what you learn in the real world, we need to look at how the modern web is structured. Because I think a lot of the resources at the moment, even out on the internet, tend to be a bit outdated. They tend to be like individual boxes, say the damn vulnerable web application, that lab environment is a PHP box. And that has things like SQL injection, XSS and such. And it's great to learn those techniques, but it doesn't accurately reflect the state of the modern web today. And the modern web, I'm sure many of you are aware, is incredibly complicated. It has DNS, a lot of middleware, there's virtual hosts, cache, a lot of JS frameworks that are completely different to each other. So how do we approach this? And the key is to understand how the modern web is structured. And by that, I mean DevOps. Learning DevOps actually really helps with hacking as well. Because once you understand the common patterns between how companies write their code, you can start to understand where the discrepancies start to exist in these systems. So I hope this diagram isn't too small, but effectively, the modern web, a modern platform will have the front end, which usually has JavaScript frameworks, that kind of thing. It could be Next.js, which recently had a vulnerability. There's middleware, which tends to handle things like routing, cache of resources like images and stuff, load balancing for distributing the workloads, and sometimes even authentication as well. For example, limiting access to certain kinds of servers. And then, of course, at the very end is the backend, which contains all the logic, the code, often the cloud deployment, and the database. So this is largely what the modern web stack is. A lot of companies tend to have things like Okta, which implements single sign-on to allow centralized user management. And what I would like to point out with all of this is that the key to success in bug bounty is to generally focus on one specific area of this, because it's very much a kind of industry where you need a competitive edge of some kind. And so I specialize personally in a lot of JavaScript stuff like post message. But I know a lot of other hackers who would say reverse engineer 0 days and that kind of thing. So I hope that kind of helps to bridge that little gap there. And so how do we approach these systems? They're really complicated. And honestly, they're pretty overwhelming to look at the very beginning. So the first thing to do is we need to model the system. The best way to get high impact vulnerabilities is to understand contextually what is the most valuable type of object for the company. If it's like a phone company, it's probably going to be user phone numbers. We're looking for the treasure chest. Next, we need to look at their tech stack. Are they a Java shop? Are they using Go? Do they have, say, CDNs? How have they deployed their infrastructure? And we can map all of this out and then begin to understand how it all works. So once you have this idea, you can start to theorize potential attack vectors that could exist. This could be authentication issues. If I try and do a 2FA bypass, what happens? And so it's good to make a list of all of your ideas. This is the best way to kind of get past the initial, when you look at a technique too close, like just XSS, and that it's not great to just hone in on one kind of bug, because then you miss the bigger picture. A lot of bugs could also come from just having two features that behave perfectly normally independently, but when you put them together, begin to cause issues. And so I cannot emphasize enough just how important a context-specific threat model is. This is key to hacking the modern web. And then once you have your list, you can start testing. And bug bounty takes a huge amount of persistence, because often you're hacking things that have been looked at by red teams, have been looked at by pen testers, and you need to see what falls through the gaps effectively. So it's a battle of attrition. It's a battle of creativity. Persistence and creativity is what leads to bounties. And luck is there as well, but you can create your own luck by working hard. That's the way I always see things. So if you're unsure where to start, just log on to Bugcrowd. You need to just start. Once you start, it'll all start to make more sense. And so just a case study of how creativity tends to impact what you find is a bug I found about a year ago, I think, it was sitting in plain sight for over 2 years. Effectively, what it was there was a platform that had low privileged users and they had admins. And when you invited a new user to your tenant, for some reason, the new role was the admin role. Like when they joined, they had admin, which made no sense. And so what you could do was, if you timed when you join as the new user properly, you could just get full admin on the whole tenant and like even demote the person who invited you, which is crazy. But this was missed by a lot of people because they didn't look at how the thing was behaving. They just saw XSS, access control. They just went for what they knew rather than looking at the context. And this resulted in a $2,000 bounty at the time. And so I'd like to do the live hacking demo now, which is the fun part where I'll actually try and show you in practice how to threat model and how to look at the modern websites. So for the sake of demonstration, I hope you can see I have T-Mobile up here.
Yep, you can see all
And
that.
this is cool. This is T-Mobile's bug bounty program on Bugcrowd. They have a really, really good program. You can see their average payout for the last 3 months is $26,000, which is absolutely nuts. So the next section we can look at here, this is just the base stats about their program performance maybe. And when you scroll down a bit, you have targets which show you what you are allowed to hack and what you're not allowed to hack. Now, it's crucial to always read the scope very thoroughly before you start, because the last thing you want to do is cause an incident by hacking something you're not supposed to be hacking. And sometimes they'll say, all of these are in scope except these few items, and those can catch you out pretty often. They also have bugs that might be out of scope that maybe they've received too many reports for, and they're working on like a more widespread mitigation. Again, you don't want to waste your own time. It's very important to read the scope very, very carefully. So here you can see they have a monthly special target as well. Bug bounty programs often run campaigns to incentivize people to look at certain parts of their scope. These bonuses can get really, really crazy. Like here, the P1, which is a critical bug, is $55,000 for a law enforcement requests portal. But I want to look down here to the core assets. A P1 is 55,000 and a P2 is 35,000. And this includes sprint.com and tmobile.com. So we can just start with sprint.com. Well, okay, it redirects to T-Mobile, but that's fine. So here we have the landing page. I have extensions running in my browser. These are post message listeners that run on the page, so they tell me more information about the client-side stuff. I have the iframes as well, another extension I wrote for myself. And this is Foxy Proxy, which is an extension that lets me enable my proxy from my browser very, very quickly. And so before I get into the actual web traffic, I'd just like to browse the application, understand how it works. You can see they have a cart, and immediately that makes me think, could there be payment flaws? Could there be issues with race conditions where you get 3 or 4 things for one payment? There's a search. This could potentially, it's unlikely it's when it's T-Mobile, but it can lead to, say, XSS if they're reflecting different values from the search. And they have an account section with a login, which is what really what we're interested in. And so if we click on the login, immediately takes us to a different page, account.tmobile.com. You need to be careful here because this may not be in scope. We can go back and we can see that it probably is in scope here, but that isn't always the case. You need to be careful. At a more technical level, I can see that there's redirect URI parameters, and there's a few more parameters like that that tell me that it's probably using OAuth, which is pretty common protocol for authentication. And we have emails and phone numbers for logging in. I also think when I see emails and phone numbers, there was research published last year about discrepancies in email parsing. With phone numbers, they're also, like, social engineering is always out of scope with bug bounty, unless they say explicitly it's in scope. But phone numbers tend to be, I think, a bit more insecure because than email, in my opinion. So we can see here, there's also pay as a guest, or we can sign up. Guest is interesting because this kind of implies there's a state where you probably have like a session, but you're not logged in. And that can lead to really unexpected behaviors if it's not handled properly on the server side. So we can look at guest pay. And also, I think they basically do make you put in your information anyway. So I'll just go back to signing up. Okay, it's loading, but you can still see the fields. The problem with not creating a list is you'll end up with too many ideas and you'll lose focus when you're hacking, which is why I like to threat model beforehand. So I stay on track. I don't lose too much time on particular features when there could be bugs sitting in other places. But at least here we can see you can sign up with your email, you can sign up with your phone number. So potentially maybe there's bugs here where you could sign up maybe with guest pay, and maybe if you put in their phone number here, what if it like associated your new account with the guest account or something? And that would be like an account takeover kind of scenario. Um, and so yeah, I don't want to be creating a T-Mobile account right now, but I will fire up my proxy now to kind of have a look at the backend stuff. Actually, I think I need to share my whole screen here. There we go. Oops. I probably shouldn't show a bunch of these projects. Not a great idea. Oh, I already have T-Mobile. Cool. I like to use Kaido, which is my personal proxy of choice, because I know some of the guys who developed it. You can also use Burp Suite. Anything really works as long as you're proxying traffic properly. I'm not sure how familiar a lot of you are with HTTP as a protocol, but I'll go through it as best as I can. And so I've got some initial traffic here from enabling my proxy. And the first thing I want to do is set scope so I know I'm staying in scope. So first I'll take account.tmobile.com, and then I'll paste this into the scope in Kaido, and I'll just call this main. There's plenty of resources about how to use Kaido, so I'll just breeze through this just to kind of get us some data. So I'll set the scope, and this only shows me T-Mobile subdomain traffic. Next, we can try to say, we'll come back here. If I click pay as a guest, I want to see what happens. And we can see there's an init session API call that was made when I clicked that. Just to dissect this a bit, to kind of separate the noise from what we actually want to pay attention to. We can see this says, I hope it's not too small, but basically it's an API call for init session, which we can pretty much guess is creating a new guest session for us of some kind. There is a bearer token, an authorization bearer token, which is a JWT that I think is linked to our unauthenticated session. Now that's really interesting because JWTs themselves have a lot of flaws. They could potentially be forged, and if you can forge them, you can log into other people's accounts. There's tools you can use to brute force the secrets for this. So this is immediately something interesting. And we can, it's good to write it down, but I'll continue for the sake of the demonstration. There's another authorization header here. That's something to write down as well because we don't know which one it's using or which one it's prioritizing. We don't know if they're both being validated either. There's also cookies. I don't think these are being used for authentication here since we have JWTs already, and there is a lot of cookies. But they also tell us about the tech stack. For example, when I scroll down here, I saw something about Adobe somewhere. This incap here tells me it's Incapsula, which is a type of firewall they're using. So basically, everything in your traffic is giving you information about what their tech stack is and so on. I'm pretty sure you can use AI to get a lot of this information these days. But once you see it often enough, you see the patterns. And this is the body of the request. We can see that it is actually OAuth because we have a state parameter, we have a redirect URI, and we have scope, and that's just a pretty classic implementation. And that's, again, something for the notes because they're OAuth-specific vulnerabilities that we can look for. Typically, there on these big public programs, there's not much low-hanging fruit, and you really need to dig deep. But I find that that's just a good thing because by digging deep, you often learn a lot more. And really, if you want to be reporting bugs to these guys, you would want to know their applications as well as the engineers do. That's how you find the really cool stuff. Here, I'm just going to put in a bogus phone number, and we'll see what traffic gets sent here. and there's a CAPTCHA. CAPTCHAs are pretty effective these days at blocking, like if you're trying to brute force something. Okay, it didn't like my phone number, so I don't think it actually made any HTTP requests. But yeah, that's fine. I'll try something else. Actually, I think I'll try the shop. So here there's at the top, there's parameters. I wonder if they're reflected anywhere. So easiest way I like to check this is just to put a string that doesn't belong anywhere. Like my hacker handle is monkey, so I'll send that, and then I'll check DevTools and see if it's actually reflected anywhere by just searching the string. And it's not. So we know there's probably not going to be used for XSS. As a client-side hacker, I basically live in DevTools. Like I don't really use proxies that often anymore. I do a lot of just JavaScript hacking. That's a whole topic in itself that I won't go into today. And there are also plugins you can use or Chrome extensions and things that will automate some of this testing process, like finding reflected parameters and stuff. So we'll look at the newest iPhone and we'll try to add it to our cart. I think it might make us make an account again, but okay, we'll just add it to cart and see what happens. So the request went through, it's in our cart, which means we have traffic to look at. Oh, I didn't set the scope to the main T-Mobile page, so I'll just set T-Mobile as these use regexes, so I'll just put T-Mobile here and see what comes through. Maybe tmobile.com. Am I going too fast here? Like, is this making sense?
Yeah, this is really good.
Cool. I'll keep going. So I need to make the scope setting more general. Or I'll just unset it first to see if I'm missing any API calls. All this other traffic is noise, but it also tells us a lot about third-party apps they're using, SaaS platforms. Like liveperson.net this is probably logging or something. Or it's probably doing like a chat. I think liveperson is a chat window, like a chat widget. And so this is probably just loading the JavaScript to put that in the website. This is all metadata for loading the page. Again, LPSNM media is third-party widget. But I want the API calls for the cart. So maybe I'll just search up at the top. I'll search cart and see what I missed earlier. So there is a www.tmobile.com. And there's a post request to /self-service shop /v1/cart. And that's what we're looking for here. So if I want to isolate this, in this, I'll send it to replay. It's called repeater and burp suite. And this lets me isolate the request I want to look at and see what it's doing. So here we can see there's a cart ID. That's interesting because if we use someone else's cart ID, maybe we can add stuff to their cart. There's a token. I'm not sure what this is used for yet. So I will decode it. Oh, this is erroring out at the moment. But we can see if we select a snippet, it's just a JSON web token. I'll just make this field bigger. These are the header fields of the JWT. These are the body. This has all the data, so I want to read this part. And this tells me that there is an API subdomain for T-Mobile that I can see here. There is a lot of just metadata that is complete nonsense at the moment. But that's all stuff we can put in the notes and investigate later. And there's probably also a header up here somewhere. All of these custom headers tend to prevent CSRF attacks. And it's impossible with authorization bearer anyway. So that kind of mitigates that bug class. But we have the request here, so we can kind of guess that we know what it's doing. The next thing you could also do here, once you know what format the API calls are made in, you can take this and you can search in the JavaScript or the HTML for these API endpoints. And that might give you more things you could try. It could give you, I've found like admin endpoints in the past as well, just that weren't actively loaded on the page. They were just hidden in the JavaScript. And there's a lot of tooling out there that makes this process a lot more frictionless. Here, this is interesting, this request, because this etc.client_libs tells me that this is using Adobe Experience Manager, I'm pretty sure. And that has a lot of issues by itself. Magenta is also a shop system. So they might be using that shop system here. I can't be sure. But it's, again, all this information gives us more bug ideas. And there's no reason to stop learning in this field, because the more things you know, the more informed you are to find bugs with these various techniques. I know somebody, a good friend of mine actually, and he specializes exclusively in Adobe Experience Manager because that's his day job. And he also finds bugs in misconfigurations of that at night. And he's really, really successful, and he just does this one thing really, really well. You can also see the request I made here earlier with my string, but it didn't reflect anywhere in the response, so that's fine. I would generally advise against using automated scanners because, number one, you don't know what they're doing. They're good to run for maybe more information, but you can't really rely on them for finding bugs. Bugs tend to be much deeper in the system. Scanners generally won't find them. There is a whole class of bug hunter who looks exclusively for like low-hanging fruit and scans for them at scale. So if you're proud of your engineering skills, then you can probably try that out. And they tend to have upwards of like 50 million assets in their databases, like really, really huge systems that are basically the size of a small company. And so that's just the cart. If I go to the cart, it's probably loading it from the ID somewhere or using my cookie. And I'll stop searching carts so I'm not limiting myself. And I'll try not to find a bug either, because that would probably not be too legal. We can save cart here. That's interesting. That associates the cart with something in the database, and that's something we can work with. I also see store pickup. That means you probably have to put in your address somewhere to find your closest store, and that could lead to, say, address leaks. There is discount codes. What if you can apply 5 discount codes at once using a race condition? That could be a bug. And so basically everything can lead to bugs. Like, I think the fact that T-Mobile have nearly $30,000 average bounty in the last, 90 days, I think, is an indication enough that even these huge enterprises are very, very vulnerable. Like, really, once you see some write-ups and some hackers at work in front of you hacking these systems, you realize that we're all screwed. Everything has bugs. So I generally would like to advise don't go for non-paying programs. If you're going to test for bugs, do it somewhere where your efforts are going to be rewarded. That's just my personal opinion. If you would like to hack on free programs that don't pay you, that's fine too. They tend to be a bit easier because no one really looks on them. But conversely, there's no monetary reward for doing that. So personally, I would advise sticking to paying programs. Now, just some things to be more careful of. When you see things like contact and support, it's often out of scope to send a lot of, say, support messages, because the last thing you want to do is annoy the actual staff and get yourself kicked off the program. It happens all the time with people who don't properly abide by the ethical boundaries of bug bounty. We have to test with permission at all times. And that can also get you kicked off the platform for repeated transgressions of these rules. So uh, always do, if you don't want somebody sending you a ton of messages, don't do that to them, basically. But there's no harm in most things you're trying, like, cart stuff that's not going to bother anybody. Um, yeah, I think I'm not sure what else I can go through here. Link, do you want me to go through another program, or is there anything more you'd like me to cover?
It's up to you. If you have a bug you received recently that you'd like to talk through, or if anyone in the crowd has questions, we can jump into questions too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do live hacking with questions as well, so um, that would be great.
Yeah, we have a question here.
Sure.
So when you're doing bounties, how do you decide where to focus your time? Because a lot of people probably looked at these before you and didn't find much. So where do you start? I guess I know we kind of walked through it, but where do you spend a majority of your
Yeah.
time?
So I generally look at the main page of a lot of systems because the reality is they still have bugs. I have certain kinds of platforms that I like to look at. Like I've got a track record of destroying insurance programs just because I know the design flaws they repeat. Um, and if you really don't know what program to even start with, then I would recommend just going for what you enjoy. Because once you're interested in it, it doesn't matter what the payback is from, if you find no bugs, it's fine because you're still enjoying hacking on this company. So yeah, do what you like. That's my advice. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, we got another question over here.
Sure.
So I'm kind of curious where you got the name Monkey, and also follow up. So you talked about the ethical boundaries of bug bounty. Have you ever walked
Yeah.
kind of like a fine line between what you were doing was ethical and maybe not so ethical?
Okay, so the monkey username was when that meme started taking off, and I was like, oh, this is really funny. And somehow the meme hasn't died yet, which is
I mean-
great. So that's where my handle came from. And regarding the ethical side, I've never crossed any serious legal boundaries. Now, there are cases in bug bounty where you can do things that are not illegal but more beneficial for you as a hacker. And by that, I mean if you find a large number of, say, systemic problems, then it's in your best interest to be paid for each one individually. But the program might want to lump them into one submission or something. And so there's small edge cases like that where I wouldn't say it's the most ethical thing to do in the interest of security, but when this is your livelihood, you have to make these trade-offs. And often we like to build good relationships with the team themselves. So it's all a big balancing act, really. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, we have another question over here.
Yep.
So if you find a bug and let's say you think you can chain it with something else, how much effort do you put in to try and do that before you just leave it as it is and submit the one you have? In terms of like just
So,
recon
yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I always try to change stuff, like always. With things like open redirects, like never report them as is. They're so useful as a gadget for things like SSRF or OAuth bugs. Really, really useful. Effort-wise, depends a lot on. It's good to be introspective of, say, how long does it take you to find a bug, and then kind of compare how much time you can afford to spend before it starts having like a financial penalty. But sometimes some problem will just really piss me off, and I'll spend like 10 to 20 hours just trying to bypass one thing. So I'd say keep going until you want to give up. Keep going a little bit more and then give up. That's that's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I also have a question for all your like paid findings, what would you say is like the average amount of time it would take you to find a bug?
So I've been doing this for 5 years now. This is my 5th year, and that number has been going down slowly over the last couple of years. It depends on what you're hacking on, number one, and it really depends on what you're hacking on. But at the moment, I'm looking on Google because they're holding a live hacking event, and it only took me like, I'd say, less than 10 hours to find my first issues there. But I've had platforms where I've spent over 50 hours and found nothing. So maybe on average, like at least 10 to 15 per bug, maybe.
Oh yeah, we have another question over here.
Yeah, you went back a couple times to kind of your financial motivations and incentives. I wanted to ask, to whatever degree you feel comfortable talking about, just because we're all about to look for positions places, how did you end up in the kind of financial situation you are, and what is your relationship like with the Bugcrowd or whatever other orgs that you kind of work with in this sense?
Could you elaborate on the question a little bit?
Yeah, as in, are you directly reaping these bounties yourself, or are you like getting a salary and then giving them the benefits? What's kind of the motivation for you on a
Right,
you
yeah.
know financial basis?
So bug bounty is pretty much a meritocracy where you're only paid for what you find. It's not hourly, which is why it's so difficult to make a career out of it. So I try to focus on programs that pay over a certain amount of money for critical bugs, because nowadays this is my career. And so I will not be able to make a living if I look on smaller companies. I have to focus on Google or T-Mobile because they pay so well. But when I was starting, I started just when I started college, and I just wanted like money to mess around with. I didn't want to get a part-time job pretty much. And so I looked on programs that would pay 500 for a medium instead of 5,000. I would highly, highly recommend keeping it as a hobby as long as you can, until you have some pretty good stats that show, yeah, you can support this full time. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure I really addressed it properly, but
Yeah, you're good. I also have a question. How did you get into bug bountying, and how would you recommend like any of us got into bug bountying if we were interested?
yeah, I just needed money. I just needed money, and I had a lot of like experience with Python and stuff in school. So I was like, look, I found this bug bounty thing. I'll give it a shot. And then I joined the Bugcrowd Discord server, and I met a really good friend there. I've known him for now 4 to 5 years, and he really helped me kind of uh, get through the most difficult part of bug bounty when you're not really finding anything. It's the problem is this. It's really hard to find a mentor because nobody has the time to mentor you. But I highly recommend joining like these Discord servers where you can put a question there and they'll happily answer it. And so that started out as like a hobby, and I found my first bug, and I was like, oh, I can like actually do this. Like this is making more sense. And so I did it part-time for 3 years. My bug bounty profile actively is the direct cause of how I got my first job, because they saw that and they saw the kinds of stuff I was submitting, and I was talking about my bugs in the interview, and they were really impressed, and that's how I got my first job. So bug bounty really has a direct career consequences as well.
Great. We
And
have
can you, sorry to interrupt, can you talk a little bit more about that, Kieran? Like, was that intentional when you like took those bugs into the interview and like that process, or was that just kind of an accidental?
It just kind of happened because I was reaching out to a bunch of other Irish bug hunters. Now, they are not full time, but there's some really skilled guys. And I was just reaching out to them. And one of the guys was like, hey, why don't you try an interview at where I work? And I was like, sure, I'll give it a go. And I did, and they were just super happy with the profile that I'd built up over the like 2 years or so at that point. And that led to me passing the interview and getting the job out of it. Um, so it wasn't intentional, but if you are intentional about it and you go to the right companies, it can give you a huge advantage, like huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, we have another question.
What's like the most complex bug that you found? If you can talk about it, that is.
That's a tough one. I know some of my most simple bugs, but complex is I had a bug that I've not disclosed publicly, so I can't tell the specifics, but it was like a ridiculously long client-side chain on AWS's landing page, like when you log in on the console, that led to $15,000 bounty. And it was like a bunch of steps. It used a load of JavaScript techniques. It used like a differential between how the browser was processing something and how the server was processing something. And it was using some of AWS's own cloud systems as gadgets to exfiltrate information. It was just huge. And it took me like, I'd say like maybe over 50 to 100 hours to get the chain complete.
Wow. Yeah. We have another question here.
Uh, what's the highest payout that you got, and what was the category of the bug?
The highest was 22,000 on, it was server-side request forgery. So effectively, I was able to make requests to the internal network of the company.
We have a question here.
Yep.
As far as your process of disclosure, does that always stay a private part of the process, or have you ever gotten to publish anything or talk about it at a conference or anything to that impact?
Yeah, this is something that varies hugely depending on which company you're talking to. Companies like Google are really lenient. If you talk to them first, they're pretty happy to like find a middle ground of disclosure. I would say the majority of companies don't like disclosure under any circumstances. But it's something you can always ask the team. The worst thing they can say is no. So
When you show
if
on the program page,
disclosures,
it'll usually list too. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's pretty easy to figure out, I think, which ones do and do not accept disclosure. And if it's not clear, you can always just message the team or ask Bugcrowd to reach out. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I have a question. I found your thought process while you're approaching everything pretty interesting. What would you say is like the most important part of your mindset as you approach this stuff?
So I kind of my approach is just like spray and pray almost, because it's pattern recognition. All of bug bounty is just pattern recognition. And so, not to systemize my own brain too much, but when you look at something enough times, you will eventually begin to spot where something isn't behaving as it should be. So that's why it's so important to stay on top of the industry's latest like developments and stuff, because that's all the more context for your own mind to spot differences. It's not a very specific answer, but at an abstract level, that's what's happening when I'm hacking.
Yeah. I think we're all out of questions here. Do you guys have any? Oh, wait, we have one more. Wait.
One more question. So it seems like you spend a lot of time doing these bug bounties. What do you usually like to do out, away from the keyboard? Are you a gamer also? What's the deal there?
So I would say I spend like 5 to 6 hours a day actively hacking, and maybe 2 hours doing like more education stuff of just reading or listening to podcasts. But I do bouldering twice a week. I go to the gym twice a week. And I go to language exchange, so I learn German, for example. And I do a lot of reading as well. And I used to play games, and then my PC broke. So that kind
No.
of killed that hobby. I still have the parts, so I can get my my 3060 Ti out of my broken computer. But yeah, when my friends are online, I play like Fortnite or whatever for the nostalgia of it.
Man, Fortnite
Yeah.
in 2025, what we doing?
Yeah.
Hey, but a lot of people's ears perked
yeah,
up at bouldering. A bunch of people love bouldering here, so great to hear you do
so
it too.
good. Yeah, I'm like V4 or V5 about at the moment, so keeps me in shape. Is that it for the questions?
Yeah, I think we're all good on questions here. Is there anything else? We have another 10 minutes or so.
I'm all good, but if you have anything else you'd like to talk about.
No, that was good. Like I said, if you create a profile and find a vulnerability, even if it's a duplicate, please let me know, because as I'm sure Kieran can attest, it still indicates that you found something, right? Like it shows that you're making progress, even though somebody found it before you. And so I think that's something very important to remember. But yeah, other than that, feel free to reach out. Make sure you follow Kieran's blog. It's really good, and there are a few others that I think are really helpful. Just so you know, I'm also learning as well, and it's a great way to like keep up to date with new trends and anything that's happening. Any ones that you recommend, Kieran, particularly? Critical thinking is a good one.
Yeah, Critical Thinking podcast is amazing. It's pretty technical. They go pretty in depth with a lot of topics. There's a lot of YouTube channels that are really, really good. There's always new ones cropping up. I think we can probably link them after this presentation. And Portswigger have labs that are amazing. They're all free. They're all very technical. Like they start easy and they can get into pretty much the latest and greatest techniques. And Portswigger also have probably the best researchers for web hacking in the world, and their blog posts are just amazing. So I would highly recommend that. And I think Bugcrowd themselves also have YouTube channel with resources that I used some of those when I was getting into hacking with like Jason Haddix's YouTube videos and stuff, all these walkthroughs. So the information's out there.
Yeah, thank you
I
guys
would
so much.
second the mentor thing too. That makes a big difference if you can find someone or work with somebody else in your club to hold each other accountable in a way as you learn, because it's challenging, and finding that first one is the greatest obstacle in my mind.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
actually
and I
have
think with,
mentorship groups about web app hacking. It's kind of funny. Meets every Monday.
Nice.
I think with when creativity is such a key part of the hacking process, especially with bug bounty, having the viewpoints of like more than one person is hugely beneficial. It's why collaboration is so popular in bug bounty, because something you miss might be sitting in plain sight for somebody else. I've got live hacking event coming up next week, and there's like a group of 4 of us where we just share information, and we're not quite working together like on everything, but we share a lot of our leads together because some of us have strong points that others and others would have different strong points. So helping each other is just amazing for learning and amazing for finding bugs as well.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I think you definitely inspired some people. I saw some people downloading some software in the middle of your talk and stuff. Yeah, but this was great. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
I think
thanks so
we're
much
good
for having
transition.
us. Bye.
Hi guys.